Hi, Eva. Hey, Dan.
Hello.
Good morning to you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning, Franco. It was hard to leave the other session. I hated to leave.
It was a great session. Patty's last comments there were very striking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I got my voice back.
There's Franco. Hey, Franco.
How you doing? That's great. More importantly, how are you, Franco? It's been a hell of a week, but you know what? I made good progress. So, Eve, I had a bit of a fever last weekend.
Oh my God.
I even had to get the COVID tested and everything came back negative. But anyway, life just comes.
Oh, I read that finally the toilet paper shortage has come into clear view. Anytime someone coughs in a grocery store, 25 people get shits in their pants. So any little bit of a sniffle, a cough, I mean, you just don't want to do it in public.
Oh, I love it. Well done, Eva. I got to use that one.
But not at this conference.
No. Oh, what the heck?
Yeah, a good one I heard was like previously you used to cough to cover a fart, and now you fart to cover a cough.
I love it.
Anyway, yeah.
This is after a long week.
Hi, everybody. Yeah.
Absolutely, Dan. Travis, thank you. I don't think we've ever formally met, but thank you for making time today.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here. Good to see a few people. Ava, good to see you. Hope you're well.
Good to see you again, Travis.
No, it's just great. And I mean, as I kind of mentioned in emails, we have no idea of totally knowing it's all virtual, how many people will join us, but we'll have the conversation. It gets recorded, and hopefully it can be could be fodder for or inform future thinking, because we certainly need it big time. So, but yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think joining us will be Beth, and then of course it's a virtual. Yeah. Anyway.
Hopefully, none of our comments will be another arrow into.
Oh, isn't that
Patty's back? I mean, what a great analogy. Just
powerful metaphor. Honestly,
powerful. Yeah.
I mean, it really is. And I mean, and the thing would be, I think I've mentioned this to Eva, but in your vital signs, when you announced that, I just think what you said, the courage you showed that day, I don't know if it was, I can't, I think it was either videoed, but where Eva just declared, I mean, her own recognizing her own position of privilege in what that means when you're going into situations. Like, I just thought, Eva, you moved me that day. I mean, you've moved me a lot of times, but I'm just saying that particular day.
Thanks, Franco.
In terms of your courage to do that. We'll see here as people join us. But because I think that, I mean, what I would say, I'm sure I've been that person that's throwing some of those arrows, but I didn't even know I was doing it. That's the sad part. I mean, in a sense, I mean, it would have been bad if I was doing it intentionally, really bad. But if you're doing it and you don't even know you're doing it, and you say, holy mackerel. Welcome, Beth.
How are you feeling, Franco? Sorry, I'm just getting myself set up here.
Oh, much better. I was saying to Dan, yeah, the early week was not great. That was not part of this plan. It was not part of the plan. But I'm getting the battery's getting whatever the right word, pistons,
All right.
batteries. Anyway,
Okay, we were all worried about you, so glad to
Thank
hear
you.
you're on the mend.
thank you very much. Anyway, I think people have, we'll see, hopefully. Oh, here's Holly. People have started to come, I think. I mean, while we're waiting, I encourage us, please be bold. Like, I think today, this is not a time for us to be to be mild and meek. I think we need to challenge each other and the world, so anyway, I just say
You're
that.
usually advising me to go the other way.
I know, but not today. Go over the
I
top,
typically-
Dan.
I have the same thing happen to me typically, Dan, so thanks, Franco.
Yeah.
Love it.
And by the way, does everybody know everybody? Dan, Doherty, Beth, and Eva, Travis. Dan and I have other background. We're both Rotarians, and so yeah, we had lots of conversations in the last year, particularly with all that's going on. So
As is Eva.
yeah,
No, I haven't had the privilege of meeting Beth or Dan before, actually. So
oh great,
yeah,
welcome.
Good to meet you both.
Investing YYC, Beth and Dan. That's yeah, that's great.
Travis, we'll have to get you over to our social impact lab and have you meet our social innovation, social enterprise team.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. I think I've been in there once for it was one of the IRP workshops that
Yeah.
you were doing that I think I sat in for once, but it's a great space.
Yeah, no, I think I think I'd like to, have a deeper conversation between you, myself, James Gamage, our Director of Innovation, and maybe Monique Blow from J5, who's our design partner in the lab.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
no, we
appreciate
would
your
love that.
feedback on some of the things we're working on.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. We'll set it up.
Sounds
Thank you.
good.
Yeah. Neat.
All right. Anyway, so I'm going to give you a bit of a heads up. Just I wasn't going to, but I'm going to. In the kind of the initial thing, I'm going to be asking each of us. We've read each other's bios, so we're not going to spend any time going through all the great things and the great people you are, and I am too. But the question would be is what's missing in that bio that you think should be, not should be there. Just maybe one or two things in that bio that you probably people will never see because they'll never get there into that bio. So just be thinking about that because we'll do that as a bit of just. Anyway.
That means I have to go back and read my bio. I don't know. What's in
No. You don't have to do that. Okay, the room is beginning to fill, so we'll just keep the people a minute or so. It's 9:59. We have until 11, I believe, so. Quiet time on screen. Patty, I noticed you just joined us. I just want to say we were talking about it earlier here, just with the panel, the arrows metaphor, powerful, very, very powerful,
Thanks, Franco.
very powerful. Okay, we're going to, people are still coming in, but you know what? In the interest of time, because the conversation was critical, thank you all for joining us today, joining us at this half day on reimagining the social sector. Small job. And under kind of a sub-theme, twice the need and half the money. What a challenge. And so I think we've been able together to bring together, from my perspective, a panel of people that I think I fundamentally respect, people that I just see doing tremendous things, tremendous thinkers. And so with that, we've read their bios, but I'm going to ask each of us and the panel and each of us in the room, but we won't have time to get to everybody. So, but for the panel, I'm going to ask them. And it really isn't, and they have the opportunity to pass, but relative to their bios, what's one thing that is missing in that bio that we'll probably never see? And just so we get a sense of what that is, and be thinking about your own bio, by the way. And so with that, let me start, because the theme here today is funders in the reimagining of the social sector. It's funding and funders. And so with that, I'm going to ask for me, let me just start with myself, what you'll never see in my bio, but in fact, I almost got fired twice. Once as a senior manager in one city, and in another time as CEO, very, very close to getting fired by my board. So, and then I think relative to this week, particularly after Monday's conversation on diversity and inclusion, that I am a privileged white male. And just being able to express that in a bio. And with that, Dan, I want to ask you, what if there is anything, and by the way, I've said to folks, they can pass, so that this is not an embarrassment moment.
I think that, you know, a line I use a lot is we are who we are because of who we are. And one of the things that's not in my bio is when I was the chair of Hull Child and Family Services back in the 90s. That's when Ralph and Jim Dinning and the team were cutting budgets and doing different things. And we engaged the entire staff at Hull to help us decide what we're going to look like in the future. And it was really empowering because the first step was that the people that are in the front line said, well, the board, you don't understand what the hell we do anyway. And I said, well, that's what we're trying to do. We want to understand. And so we went through this process, and it was absolutely amazing to see what we did, how we did it, and the ideas that percolated up. And we became a better organization at Hull because of that. But at the end, and this is where my learning thing was, is that, you know, back then, if you remember, there's lots of KPIs and all those types of things. And we're going to measure people's lives with a KPI. I'm not sure how we do that. But we had some money left in the budget, actually, even after we had our cuts and all that. And I said to the lead of the team of people that were working frontline, I said, why don't we create a bonus for all of you if we meet our KPIs? And he said to me, he said, Dan, I appreciate that, but why don't we take that money and hire 3 more people that could impact the lives of these kids? So again, my learning of that was to get down in the grassroots, understand what's happening, and you make a lot better decisions.
Thank you. And folks, Dan Doherty has his own company. He's been doing business differently. The distribution company here in town, but he's also extensively involved in Rotary. He's an assistant governor and does a huge amount of work across the area. So he's one of our panelists. Over to you, Eva.
Well, I would say that I'm just a middle-aged Mennonite from the village, raised in a 500-person village in rural Manitoba, and English is not my first language. I went to school speaking the Dutch-German dialect of Low German and learned English only in school. And that will probably never be on my resume, but it's a key part of who I am.
That's great. Thank you, Eva. And Eva, by the way, it just so happens to also be the CEO of the Calgary Foundation, which has $1 billion in assets that they're managing on behalf of the community. One of the largest, I don't, it's way up there in Canada anyway. You may be number one or number, but it's up there. But thank you, Eva, for making time. And then we have with us Travis Inlow at Local Investing YYC. This is kind of interesting in this conversation as well. So Travis.
Thank you. Good to see everybody today. I guess something you probably won't see in my bio is that I was an oil and gas investment banker. Not that I am ashamed, or anything of that work, but I think in certain circles, particularly in this province, there's negative connotations in supporting oil and gas. And, I've made a personal choice to kind of move on from that line of work into, community economic development and on an entirely different path, kind of using a lot of the tools, that I've learned from that traditional sector, which I think is really powerful and applicable in this sense. And so, but generally speaking, it's not a great conversation starter when you're at the soul of the next economy.
Thank you very much, Travis. It's great. And over to you, Beth Gignac.
Thanks, Franco, and hello, everyone. Honored to be here this morning. Things that you won't find on my bio. I'm very fortunate to come from a very close-knit family. My family lives in Windsor, Ontario. My mom and dad, my sister and brother, and all my nephews, my large extended French-Canadian family. Very fortunate to have grown up in a loving, supportive, and caring environment. And they encouraged me to be curious. And no idea was wackadoodle enough for them in terms of supporting me in my own journey of creative thinking. And one of the things that I say to people who I'm close with is I make an assumption that I'm the person in the room who knows the least about anything that we're talking about, and that it's my job to actually hustle hard in my own mind and in my own heart to listen deeply enough to understand how I can make a contribution.
That's great. Thank you so much. And for anyone that may not know, Beth is the Chief Operating Officer of the United Way here in our city in Calgary and area. So she does a little bit of a job on the side besides all the other things. But anyway, folks, these four folks today have agreed to be on this panel to engage in this conversation. But there's lots of wisdom and expertise in the room by some of the names I see. So the notion here is it is very much of a conversation. So we are going to ask some questions, as you usually do in these panels. I've invited the panelists to be absolutely as bold, whether they do it organizationally, personally, however they want to come at it, and kind of things. So let me start with the first question. And then, by the way, what we will do is we will leave I'm hoping, at least 20, 25 minutes for questions and comments. So please use the chat. Randy's in the background, Randy Poon, who's one of the co-hosts for this forum. And so we'd certainly welcome questions and comments as well. This is being recorded for anybody, so that for future reference and future use as well. So the wisdom the collective wisdom here is important. So clearly, I mean, as we looked at the reimagining of the social sector, funders, to say the least, and I've been in the sector all my life, play such a critical factor. I mean, what they think, what they say, what they do absolutely impacts what happens. We cannot reimagine or rethink what a social sector would be without the funders, whoever they are, being part of this. So let me kind of just quickly go in 1 or 2 minutes, talk about, because all of you in this, the four of you are funding in one way or another. So Beth, starting with you, like if you look at what life has changed where you are in 1 or 2 minutes in the last 9 months, and learnings, maybe even 2.
Wow. Yeah, so much has changed for all of us in the last year for sure. At United Way, one of the things that we had started doing about 18 months ago was revisiting our whole approach to community investment. And this has been a journey that many of you know United Way has been on for almost 10 years in terms of making transitions and how we think about our investments. You know, Patty Pond said something in the session just before. How do we think about making way as a funder? And that's really been at the core of how we've thought about our work. How can we be a contributor? How can we listen not only to the great organizations that support people, but how can we listen to the people who need the services and take advantage of the services provided? So we've done a lot of deep listening, and we've made a big transition in terms of our community investment approach. The one thing that the pandemic did is that it told us that we need to lean into that change. We need to lean into the networks. We need to lean into the relationships. And we need to understand how we can invest and support collaborations. One of the things the panel was talking about before was, you know, being deliberate and intentional in designing services. We need to be deliberate and intentional in designing collaborations. And we need to be deliberate and intentional when we think about, you know, quote, innovation as a practice in daily work. It's a practice and it takes practice. And it is a formal business approach. And these are things that we've been really wanting to focus on at United Way. And I think that, you know, there's some things that we need to say goodbye to. And we've been thinking about saying goodbye or saying farewell to this notion of competition amongst funders. One of the things that we've learned in the last 6 months is how important it is for us as funders to talk with each other more, to listen with each other more, to think about where we have shared outcomes, where we can provide share value. And I think that the strengthened relationship that we have with other non-governmental funders and governmental funders has really been a good output of the past 6 months. And I would thank and recognize our colleagues at the Calgary Foundation, you know, in terms of being a really great partner and a really great thinking partner in terms of what some of these next steps are. So Eva, I wanted to thank you and your team.
Great. Thank you, Beth. Travis, I mean, you're in a totally different and yet related in terms of how your life has changed at Investing YYC.
Yeah, so our organization it's a community investment cooperative. You know, we're built around the idea that there is capital in our community that is looking to be directed towards local businesses and social enterprises that are creating positive social environmental change right here locally. So, you know, I think absolutely, you know, there's been lots of impacts, you know, over the last year. Many businesses, as we all know, have struggled, you know, through the pandemic in some ways or others. And some businesses have actually thrived depending on what their business model has been. And importantly, you know, I think we recognize that individually, you know, people have been affected in different ways as well, but that there still is, you know, a desire for wanting to support, you know, businesses here, innovation here in the city, support diversification, support causes that you know matter and care to us. And so the real purpose behind Local Investing YYC is to be able to provide an investment vehicle for people to put their capital towards local opportunities. This is typically a space that's inaccessible for everyday people. This is kind of venture capitals, private equity, accredited investors usually play in this space, and we believe that bringing the community together can have a real impact on a lot of great enterprises that are trying to have a positive impact. So yeah, we're seeing the ups and downs, you would say, as the market continues to evolve, but we are just launching on our next capital raise and raising up to $2 million that we're going to invest into 5 to 8 local opportunities here in the near future.
Excellent, Travis. Thank you. Eva.
Well, I'd say that I think the entire structure of philanthropy is being challenged today, and it's causing us at Calgary Foundation to do a lot of deep thinking. Books that, have, and this is before pandemic and before the Black Lives Matter movement, but already there were people, wise, great people, suggesting that, our philanthropy is in fact causing some of the very problems that it is created to support, but not really helping. And I'm reminded when Randy in the earlier session said, often the helping is punitive. That's what made me think about this, that, philanthropy is the wealthy giving to the needy. And Calgary Foundation is an endowment and it's been built for 65 years. So we come from the wealthy families who have wanted to make their contribution for the good of the community. But the very structures of that keeps the problem in place. And so then, of course, COVID hits and Black Lives Matter movement happens after the George Floyd murder. And the things people have been thinking about become squarely in focus. And so there's this gulf between those with wealth who want to be philanthropic, feeling guilty and offended, and that's labeled white fragility, and being afraid, how do we now help in the right way? And so I think we're at a crossroads in philanthropy to listen, to learn, to change the structures of how helping is so it isn't punitive. And it does what, in fact, all philanthropists want to have happen. And if we had the answer, we'd already be doing it. So I think it's a matter of, ears open, learn, listen, and do it together to shift how this is working in our communities. Because clearly, it isn't doing everything we intended. Thank you,
Eva. And Dan?
I'm going to come at this a little bit differently because I'm in a number of worlds in the world. I'm in a philanthropic world. I'm in a funding role. And a comment that Patty made in the previous session is that we got to not make our decisions about us. We need to make it about the people we serve. If I were to look at Rotary in a philosophical thing, our motto is service above self. And I think what all of us need to do is get rid of this god of pomposity, that we know the answers, that we understand what's happening. And too much during all the sessions that I heard earlier in the week and now is I heard a lot of us versus them. I heard us talking about how our sector needs to be understood better, how the corporate world maybe doesn't understand, how the funders are misdirecting, we're sending money to the wrong place. Well, you know what? We all have to get rid of this mindset and get back to this service above self and to get everybody in the same room. I think money, quite frankly, is the easy part. The difficult part is for each of us to understand who we're serving. And we got to stop looking at things, from inside the house to outside the house to above, below, wherever we are, and all get into the same room and work towards solutions. If we're truly going to be responsive to the community in need, we have to have some agility, all of us. We probably need to do it with lots of alliances. We need to do it in a different way. And if we can get to that ground root level and understand each other and walk the talk, we'll be a lot better off.
Thank you very much, Dan. Here's the, by my gray hair, and there's other people in our room that have gray hair. This is not what some of the things we're saying are not completely new. We have said some of these things before. So here's the challenge I would ask each of you to come back with. What are the barriers? What's preventing us or has prevented us? And maybe COVID is forcing us now, whether we want to or not, and maybe that's the opportunity, but something or some things are preventing us from doing some of the things all of us have said, to come at this world differently as funders or charities and whatever. So what do you feel, again, at top of mind in a minute or so, what are the barriers? And Eva, maybe we'll start with you this time.
I'll offer one thought. Perhaps a barrier is that we talk about and think about survival of our organizations. And in fact, today with COVID, we're talking a lot about who won't survive. And maybe if we shifted that eye, and Dan just said it, to survival of the mission, rather than survival of my organization. Maybe if we could think, how could we use the diminished resources we have to ensure that mission continues into the future? And if we could, now that's a hard thing to do when it's all of our jobs that matter, but maybe we go into it with some faith that in fact, when the eye goes there, we might get more creative and see ways that mission can stay intact. So maybe that's a barrier. Survival of organization being one of the things we're talking about. It's the language we use and it's in our focus. And I'd like to try to replace that with survival of mission.
Wonderful thought. I mean, okay. I mean, we could get into that conversation. It's just been great. Travis, what about you?
Yeah, so I've been kind of approaching things more from, call it an investment.
Yes,
standpoint.
absolutely. By the way, investment they're not that different. I mean, I've heard funders in the charitable sector or the social sector talk about investing. So it's, go ahead, Bill, sorry.
Yeah, so a few things for me, and I think a lot of this has come out of, say, the investment readiness program and ideas around social enterprise. And as nonprofits or others are moving toward looking at profitable type of activities that can sustain their mission, it's that the enterprising piece, still really needs to be fleshed out and better understood. For investment to take place at the end of the day, the enterprising component of whatever that opportunity is needs to be understood. It needs to be well articulated. It needs to be well expressed to any kind of funder in order for that funder to try to get behind those types of opportunities. And I feel like today that there's still a lot of confusion. If you ask anybody about what is a social enterprise, what is social finance, what is impact investing, that there still is a lot of confusion around that, and that creates inaction from happening.
Thank you very much. Dan?
I think right now we need to have a phased kind of look at what we're doing. And I want to throw out ROIs and returns and all that kind of look at when we're looking sometimes at what's happening in the world. Today, we need to be able to fund the need today. That's not necessarily going to change the systemic reasons that that's happening. But we have people in our city who are starving. We have people in our city who cannot access healthcare. We have people in our city that don't even understand we're in a COVID situation. We need to change how we look at these things to get in and understand, but to fund those types of things. At the same time, we need as both funders and corporate world and nonprofits, we need to be working together in the same room to work on the systemic issues. So I think too often we get caught up and hung up on, you know, this doesn't fit our model, this doesn't fit our role, it's not capital, it's not this. Help the people that need it today. And whether it's, you know, corporately, paying people a living wage. You know, corporately, understanding the anxiety and stress that people are under. So what I'm saying is we got to break the model. And again, money becomes an issue when we try to evaluate too much based on KPIs like I talked about earlier.
Thanks, Dan. And Beth?
Yeah, I love that, Dan. I mean, what I talk about increasingly is, you know, are we in love with the problem? And I don't know that we're falling in love with the right problem. And I also don't hear enough about the person. And if we're going to be designing solutions for people, people need to be in the middle of the thinking. They need to be in the middle of the process of design. They need to be included. People need to be included and involved in the design. And we talk about what is that customer-centered approach, right? So are we actually focusing on the right problem? And to me, I think that, you know, one of the things we should be doing is trying to put ourselves out of business. I mean, my goodness, if we were really interested in solving the problems that we're faced with, we need to try to hustle hard to put ourselves out of business. And what does that mean? It means that we absolutely need to turn all of the systems inside out, right? Economic systems that we have, you know, we need to totally decolonize some of these economic constructs. They're not helpful. They're very harmful. And they've been harmful for a long time. And thinking about, Terry has said in the chat, you know, results-based. Well, yeah, my results are different from other funders' results. So if we're going to actually, as funders, you know, try to affect change, you know, are we really interested in leaning into some of those changes together as funders and saying, well, what would happen if each of us invested 15 or 20% of our available fund budgets into systems level change and supporting people who are doing that kind of work and funding that kind of work, right? Because we're asking people to do too many things with the dollars that are available, right? You can't say, well, I'm going to just do, you know, systems change. Well, I'm worried about the urgent needs that are in front of me and the person who's in front of me who needs urgent care and urgent support. That has to happen. Who's actually funding the design and the development of the new systems, the new practices, the new ways of thinking about our work and being intentional about that? And we can't do, you know, design the future off the corner of our desk. It's not going to happen. So, you know, I feel that there's a tremendous amount of potential if a percentage of our collective resources as funders were actually put into some kind of a pool that was really about intentionally redesigning the system. And it's absolutely right. Who has the time and the capacity to take that on? Well, you're not funded to take it on. And, you know, that's exactly what's happening. So, you know, I think that there's a responsibility if we as funders are saying that we're involved in the systems change business for us to truly be involved in the systems change business by funding it together because we're a part of the system. So, you know, I think that, you know, Dan, we could talk about this one all day long, right? Yeah.
Yes, and I think one that's saying some of the comments coming through the chat room, kind of as chat comments, is that, I mean, some of the things you're saying is really resonating with the folks in the room. The question, I think, is to kind of build off your last comment, Beth, is around how do we move from just talking to doing? And it doesn't have to be big things, but like, so if you can kind of reflect a little bit, even in what you've tried to do so far, I mean, and this is just why we're having the conversation this morning, either could be amplified to make what we're talking about. Like, I think conceptually we're getting it to some degree, but it's putting the wheels under it or put it on the tracks, getting it moving forward. So Travis, in the work that you do, like, I mean, and I know it's investing, but still, like what, you know, and even what advice would you have for us? Maybe because you're coming at it from a bit of a different approach.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's taking those first steps. I mean, we can all talk until we're blue in the face, but if we don't try taking that first little step to test something out, it's hard to know. So for our experience, you know, that was going out to the community in early 2019 to raise our first fund, and that was successful. And we could have put the brakes on and said, well, we're not doing it anymore because it's a pandemic and it's crazy and it's hard and everything else. But, you know, we're now we're out in the market now raising our next fund, and we're raising $2 million to try to grow our impact. And albeit, you know, it's still very small, it's taking those first steps. So I appreciate our experience is going to be a little bit different from the other you know, panelists and speakers and people in the room here today. Yeah. But it is really just taking some action and trying to test out some of those assumptions.
That's great. Thanks, Travis. Eva, as you hear this conversation, I mean, you know, you have a huge organization behind you and very influential. So,
well, I'm thinking you said it so well. You know, talk is so easy and it sounds so eloquent, and we can read great books, but how to actually get traction on that and do, and as you say, put legs on it, that is so difficult. And funders, there's many funders in Calgary, and all of them, just by the nature of funding, have an influence. So how we do what we do can be incredibly influential to make change if we just can be aware of it. I'll give one example, because it's hard to see the traction. Calgary Foundation a long time ago, you know, always asked, like, who else is doing in our application process? Who else is doing something similar? And how are you unique? And then, you know, several years, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, we changed that question. I mean, that caused people to be competitive, not our intent, but it caused people to differentiate from the others. We changed the question to who else is doing something like this and how are you working together? Little shift in just the focus of the organization applying for a grant. And it fostered collaboration rather than fostering competition. And I give that just as a simple example, because there's a concrete thing a funder did differently. There are probably umpteen many more things that could be greatly impactful, but equally small, just in the way we influence the thinking, what we're measuring, what we're asking, to pull all of our work in a different and a better direction. And, you know, I think our job as a funder is just to keep pushing back the blind spots and looking for those opportunities to shift how we do. And we can do that best by listening. So after COVID, we did a survey of charities in Calgary to ask what the greatest needs were. Calgary Foundation has never funded core operating costs. We changed that. We're funding core operating costs in this next round because charities told us that was the biggest need. So I think asking and listening is a really key thing we can do. And that might help us put legs under what do we do differently? You know, how do we put action to the talk?
Dan, thank you, Eva.
Just shoot the puck. I mean, how often have we been at a hockey game and, you know, there's a power play and we see our team skating around, they look beautiful out there. And what is everybody in the crowd yelling? Shoot the puck. Only about 5% of those shots hit the net and go in. You know what? People go in for a rebound sometimes and then they get the rebound in. Right now, I think there's a lot of us paralyzed by analysis. And we need to be able to shoot the puck. If we know that there's something going on and we need to do something, we need to adapt, we need to be agile, then do it. I mean, too often we're asking for permission or we're afraid to make a mistake, or we're all going to make mistakes. We're making big ones now because we're not responsive to the community. And I think that we need to be able to try some things and do some things. I think Bobby Turco is, I see Bobby's on the line and with her I Can for Kids. Hey, we from our level of pomposity, we say everybody's got to be doing more collaboration and we need to do that. And why aren't they? Well, Bobby knew that she needed to do cooperation and collaboration with other groups. She went ahead and did it without asking for permission. She went and did it because she knew the people she was serving needed to get it done. Those are the kind of models we need. We need that in Rotary for sure, in the way we fund projects. I think we need it in, we've done some great things with the United Way and the Community Hubs program that we've got in partnership with the City of Calgary and whatever, but we're not shooting the puck because we don't have the people in the room that we're serving. We're trying to make our decisions from outside the room. I sit on boards that complain about companies not donating to them. And I ask them, well, what is it that company, how can they get engaged? You're just assuming they have a big check to write. Good example, my own organization, my team came to me with an idea to do something with Bethany Care for all their workers. And the reason it started was one of my employees has somebody in a Bethany Care home. And the stress that the caregivers have there is immense. 1,800 employees all across the province for Bethany Care. They've had one death, but the anxiety and the stress there. So as a team, they came and said, let's give them something. Let's give a thank you to those people. That's not going to be a measurable result, but you know what? It's serving the people we need to, or helping the people we need to. So I'm asking for the funders, I'm asking for the nonprofits, just shoot the puck. Ask the hard questions of yourself, ask the hard questions of your funders, or the funders ask them of yourself as well. So, sorry.
Thanks. No, thanks. Eva, Beth, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. Dan, I love the shoot the puck. He shoots, he scores, he missed. Let's get some misses. Let's get some missed shots in there. In 2018, we started the Social Impact Lab with the specific purpose of building capacity within the sector for people to give themselves the space and the time to get access to free expertise, to help people go through deliberate, design practices, to actually do exactly that, to think about what some new opportunities might be. We've been criticized for that. We've been criticized for actually providing space for people to think about doing different things and actually doing things differently. So what? Needs to be done. More people continue to come into this space, people with lived experience, philanthropists, corporate workplace partners, agencies, thought leaders, et cetera, policymakers, et cetera, coming into this space. It's a deliberate soup pot, One of my favorite stories, I worked in the arts for a really long time, and I've always had a passion for children's literature. And one of my favorite stories is Stone Soup. And, it's about people in a village who are starving. And, someone picks up a stone and they pick up a stone and they put it in a pot. What they have is a pot and they have a stone. And they go around to every person in the village and they ask what everybody can contribute into the pot. Well, before you know it, at the end of the day, there's a pot of soup. And, when I think about what we're doing at the lab, I think about that story a lot, because that's what, in fact, we're trying to encourage people to do, is to focus on the problem that needs to be solved, to bring people together who can disrupt the current systems and actually lean into what we would call high conflict and high participation turnover. So we're not interested in a thought bubble. We're not interested in low conflict. We're actually trying to design deliberate places and spaces for people to have conflicting ideas so that they can, and high turnover of participation, which is frankly why the digital environment's been really good for us in this space. One of the things that we did in March was we launched a new platform called Responsible Disruption. It was all about weekly learnings in the COVID environment. What are people learning? What are people learning? Well, food security is a big issue in our community. It's a huge issue across our country. We decided to run a food disruptathon in the summer We had 9 ideas that emerged from a very deliberate design process, all of which are brand new ideas that can actually contribute and support what's actually also going on in the community right now, but absolutely coming at it from a different perspective. So we're saying we are actually providing some capacity building. We are providing space. We are providing opportunity for people to come into that kind of a milieu. So if you want to join it, join us. You don't have to be from the social services sector because we're all involved in the social community. So, you know, who needs to contribute to the problems that we have in front of us? All of us. It's not a social sector specific problem. And we're not designing our solution space through that lens at all. So, you know, that's a very practical, I call it a practical, tactical way to actually enact some of these ideas to give people actual space, time, capacity, and capability, skill building to actually redesign. And you know, I want to give a shout out here to Leah Bella's on the call. She's left our organization and is now in a great leadership role with a good partner of ours at the YW. You know, Talia did the bushwhacking for us on this project. And T, I just want to give you a shout out and recognize your contribution to our organization and our community in this work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beth. You know, as I kind of hear our conversation, and as you know, I've spent my life in the social sector over the years. What I'm sensing from people I've talked to, and this is not a survey, is that leadership, both probably at the board and even more so even at the staff level, particularly at the executive director, CEO level, is that people are feeling just, I don't know, tired is not even the right word, beyond tired. Beyond fatigue. I mean, and trying to find their way, certainly beginning to ask the very questions we're asking. I guess for us, from a funding perspective, what advice, I mean, even Eva, to your suggestion later, going from, you know, to mission from organization to mission, you know, that kind of, like, what advice do you have, or what would you be saying? I mean, because you are, at the end of the day, my experience in on the agency side, you know, you don't never want to, what was it, bite the hand that feeds you kind of idea with funders, all funders. And so the question I think you have is, you're feeling very vulnerable to begin with, certainly not really knowing about what the future is going to look like. So is there any advice you would have? I mean, we said shoot the puck, but it seems simple, but is it? I guess, Travis?
Yeah, thanks. I think there's so much to grapple on with that question, especially if you're looking at from a funding perspective. There are certain missions and outcomes and value that is already being created, and it's looking at different ways of how can you better kind of monetize on that outcomes and activities that are already taking place. And for me, that's kind of where the idea around social enterprise and actually addressing and looking at, you know, there is an intentional pursuit of a particular positive outcome from this enterprise. And there's capital and funders out there that are looking exactly for this. They're looking for opportunities where they can put their money into having an impact and connect with certain values and outcomes that are meaningful to them. And this is, I think, is happening across the social sector. And as you see, you know, say with the intents of the investment readiness program, the federal government program, it's meant to be capital that allows these organizations to go explore what those business models may be. And I think that's an overarching sort of an overarching opportunity, is that there's so much that's already being done. But if we keep exploring the only channel that you've received funding and that is not working, there are other opportunities that are evolving And it's sort of taking your existing business plan or your existing operation and looking at ways that it could be applicable to other sources of capital that are really trying to move into this space in different ways.
Thank you, Travis. Dan?
It's such a deep well that you've asked us to go into here. I think that all of us need to recognize the anxiety, the stress, the fatigue that Calgary in general is experiencing right now. I know corporately, we've brought in a mental health anxiety kind of program to help us deal with the anxiety that my team have. I know nonprofits across the province have done it as well. And we need to understand, we all need to be more aware of each other. And I know, Patty, you said you didn't like the idea of diversity of thought, and that was one of the arrows that shot you. But I think that we do need diversity of thought, maybe not in the way that I think you intended it, but we need to be able to sit and listen to each other to learn. I don't care where we're at in this circle of life or where we play, but we need to get better at listening to learn and know where people are at. I think if I were to look at from a funding perspective, we have to learn how to figure out ways to say yes. I think where a lot of the fatigue comes is we have a lot of maybes in the system, or we go direct to no because it doesn't fit models. So, and a long maybe is more painful than a short no. And even if we're in a space or people that are talking about things that we don't normally fund or we don't do, what I like is about this dialogue we're having today, where we have multiple funders and multiple people involved, we start to understand what each other's doing better. I think we as the funding world need to get better at understanding that, so that if I say no because it doesn't fit a Rotary club or my corporate world, I know where to direct people. I can make that connectivity happen. Beth, that's one thing that we do with the community hub, is what makes it so magical is we have all these services in one place, and we hold somebody's hand. I'm using it figuratively, we can't do that right now. We hold somebody's hand that is there for mental health issues. We walk them over to the family services program, and then we walk them over to the food program. And we all need to, and even as people in the serving the constituents, we need to get better at making that connectivity. So, and it's going to be a lot of work. But first of all, we all need to make sure we are healthy as individuals in our organizations. We're there to listen to each other, and then we can build on that connectivity.
Thanks, Dan. Eva?
I'm going to use the analogy of if I'm going on a long road trip, and I did that in September to Manitoba to visit my family. And when I got tired of driving, I got out of the driver's seat and let my husband drive. And I think sometimes the leadership fatigue comes because we're too long in the driver's seat. We don't remember to get out. And there's many leadership comes from many places. And so if we just take a breath, step aside and allow, it might be quite amazing what other leadership, great idea, creativity will step into that void and take over and drive. And it might be a better drive, and you get to recharge a bit. So that's sort of my advice for the recharge, either personally as the CEO of an organization or as an organization, Calgary Foundation. I mean, there are phenomenal solutions that come from community. And I'll think of the recent much told about story of the merger of Boys and Girls Clubs and Absent Family Services. I mean, that just came as a beautiful idea, beautifully executed, and it's going to be a good learning opportunity for many organizations in the sector. And nobody led that but the two organizations. So sometimes this allowing of others to contribute leadership, even if their title is not the CEO, is a good strategy.
That's great. And Beth?
I'm going to build on what Eva was just saying. Over the past 3 years, we've been very deeply involved as an organization, and me personally on a very deep personal journey to learn and understand more about the oral system, Indigenous system that's in our world. Dr. Regent Crowshoe and Rose Crowshoe and Kelly and Daphne Goodeagle, Edmund Comstock, Patrick Daniel, many leaders in our community have been teaching me about what it means to think together and act together and to consider resourcing together. And it's the that what it means to, and I'm going to try this iakakimat, trying hard. And for those who speak Blackfoot on the call, my apologies. But it's this idea that, we're exhausting ourselves, I think, because we're leaning and learning and thinking in a dominant system. And the dominant Western system, I don't think is particularly helpful if it's not being balanced by the oral traditional systems that are in our world. And what I'm learning in that space is that we're not trying to create cultural confusion by putting the systems together. We're saying that there's an ethical space within which we can learn and operate that takes the learnings from both systems and allows us to be strong together in our world. And for me, I think that as a settler, I need to really step back. We just did a very interesting exercise opportunity with a portion of our current expression of interest that's out. We had an elder-led and elder-informed process for determining resource allocation for Indigenous-led organizations and non-Indigenous organizations who are serving Indigenous people in our community. It was its own process. It was elder-led, elder-informed, and the consideration of resources was very supportive. It was not exhausting. It was not competitive, although it's competitive. But the consideration using the buffalo story, talking about what it means for all of us to thrive and survive, is to me a much more uplifting, positive, and frankly real way of thinking about ourselves in community, ourselves in systems, and ourselves in the actions that we're involved in the world. So, I continue to be deeply humbled about how much I need to unlearn and how much I need to learn. And that to me is a deeply and powerful way to energize myself and to keep myself in balance. So I try to increasingly find a way to operate within that ethical space as opposed to choosing one system or another. And that to me, I think is a very healthy way for our community to grow. And I think it's absolutely critical to the success of our overall world.
Thank you very much, Beth. One of the things that's running through both your comments, but also the chats and comments and questions, is that the focus, and it came out of even the original panel when we opened this morning, is that the lived experience for the most part feels outside the picture, generally. That would be the way I experienced it when I was at Vibrant Communities before I retired. Was I can remember a member, this was a few years ago, and of course she got my fur up when she said, "You people have made a business out of our misery." And of course, my immediate response, you can imagine at that time, after 40 years of work in this, no bloody way. Well, I've come to understand that she wasn't completely all right, but she wasn't all wrong at all. So the question I think here becomes, and we don't have a lot of time, but just I'm going to go around again to say, from your experience, because this applies to us as agencies, it applies to us as funders, everybody. How do we in fact bring that voice meaningfully on an ongoing basis into the room? So any kind of very quickly, any suggestions you would have that you might have already tried, are you going to try, or someone else might try to make that a reality? Because I think that would change the system too. So Dan, let me start with you this time. Oh, you're muted, sorry. Yeah.
I think Beth's comments were very appropriate in that, and again, it comes back to my use of the word diversity of thought. Sorry, Patty. But with the reality is that we, in our colonial kind of approach to life that we've had and privileged approach to life in Canada, I forgot about us. And you can see the geopolitical kinds of movements today that are about I versus we. And I think that we all need to be able to have a voice, and we all need to be able to have a dialogue. And when we hear or see something that's not right, we need to feel comfortable that we have a voice and we can say it. In my world, Travis, I've got some oil and gas redneck buddies that they really cannot figure out how I approach life and how you can have a conscience and a moral conscience and can be concerned about others while at the same time driving a successful business. And you look at things above the bottom line. That's another chat that Franco and I've had, but we need to have the strength and find the strength to challenge each other and to have open, honest dialogue. And I'm given different platforms at different things because of my positions and what I've done. And I need to be willing to ask the tough questions and to challenge the status quo. And I think I'm hearing that we're seeing that at the United Way. We're seeing that at the Calgary Foundation. We're seeing that in a number of the organizations represented here. But it starts there. It starts with us having the strength and the fortitude and the commitment to doing the right thing and remembering, it's not about us, it's about who we serve.
Thank you, Dan. Travis?
Yeah, I think I agree with all of those comments. I mean, there's clearly a disconnect on how kind of funding is being made and making sure it's represented appropriately. So seeing that there are more opportunities for all voices to be heard, if I take the perspective of entrepreneurs, that every person has an opportunity to grow a business and bring ideas forward, and that funding is not looking at that differently, but there needs to be more of those types of support systems in place. I won't take up lots of time here because I think Eva and Beth will have some great responses to this.
Thank you very much. And Beth?
I think we need to think about who benefits and really be focused on that. Something else I always say, if you're asking me to give you an opinion about something I've never experienced, I'm the wrong person to ask. And I try to step aside from that as often as possible and say, you need to go and find somebody. We'll help you find somebody. I'll help you find somebody. I'm very interested in knowing who knows that information. I think that we also need to be out in the world all the time. I was really listening when the previous panel was talking about Sue Gwynn said, are we doing strategic resource drops? And I'd love this idea. No, we're not. We're not designing our physical places. We're not designing our communities to be necessarily supportive of all people. I look out the window of my office and I see all systems and places in support of a predominant, Western way of thinking. There, I don't look out my window and see any, Indigenous gathering spaces. I don't see anything like that. So, how we think about the built environment and what it is that we choose to prioritize is really important. And I think that, again, saying, am I the right person who you should be even asking this question of? I certainly know I'm not the right person who can answer the question. And I don't answer questions that I don't know anything about. That's a really strong position to take, and have more confidence about that. I don't see that as a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength.
Thank you very much, Beth. And Eva?
I'll offer an example. Recently at the Calgary's Vital City event, that was virtual, we had a panel of 3 women, and Leanne Ireland, who's the leader of USAE, said a profound thing in her comments. And the topic was, as a racialized person, leader in the charitable sector, what's your experience? So she raised her story that in applying for funds from typical funders, including us, Calgary Foundation, she had to really demonstrate the great need. So she had to write paragraphs of how horrible the life of young Indigenous youth is in the city to qualify for the grant. And in the writing, there was no opportunity to do it from a strength base, like they got great potential, they're doing great things, there's all this great stuff happening. No, it was the focus on how bad it was to demonstrate the need, and how awful that felt for her as a leader of a charity in applying for funds. And that just hit me like, wow, there's an experience, a lived experience, and we're the funder hearing that, and the world heard it, all 800 people who attended that conference. And it behooves us to take that and let that shape the way we work with charities in our grant making.
Thank you so much. And we're at the end of our time, unfortunately, because we have not even scratched the surface, or whatever the right metaphor is. But I cannot thank you enough, all 4 of you, for your leadership and for taking the time today. I think the issue we all have in this room, so this is not just the panel now, that we're in this spot where there are 70 some odd thousand more people living in poverty than there were prior to COVID. That's just a reality. There are more people that may not have jobs. The question I think we have for going forward is that there is no choice. The crisis is here and it's now. We need to change. The question is about leadership. So I'd leave you with this thought, is that leadership, to me, the best definition I have ever come to is someone you freely choose to go to a place you wouldn't go by yourself. Someone you freely choose to go to a place you wouldn't go by yourself. To me, everyone is in this room today is being called to leadership in your way, in how you can do it. Hopefully the conversation that our panelists have put before us in how they've responded to the questions may motivate us to take on leadership in that definition, creating that place where other people will come with you that wouldn't go by themselves. Be it your staff team, be it your family, whoever it is, your organization, your agency, or your funder. So that's the question, I think, what I'd like to leave us with through that. Now, it would have been great to hear everybody. So we're all going to get the opportunity at 11:15. We're going to miss group discussions for the final kind of thinking through, and then we'll kind of end the morning around noon. So with that, thank you all. And what Randy's looking, is there anything I'm missing, Randy, before we send people off?
You're good, Franco. The link back to Swap Card, or if you go right back to Swap Card, we have the movement session. And so looking forward to having you join us there. And then back, as Franco said, with the mixed group breakout sessions at 11:20.
Okay, so is there any other questions? Anything else we want to say? Okay, thank you all. It has been my privilege to be part of you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.